All right. Welcome to the conversation today with Sid Palace. My name is Bradley Jacobs. I'm our founder and CEO here at Mylance, and I'll hand it over to Sid for an introduction on your end.
Sure. My name's Sid Palace. I am a freelance consultant in the software engineering space, specifically focused on DevOps and cloud infrastructure. And I know Bradley from both of our times at Duke University, and so that's how I got connected to Mylance. So happy to be here and to chat through my experience as a freelancer and any other topics we want to cover.
Sounds great. Well, appreciate you being here. The real main goal here is to talk about, as you said, your experience, really how you got started as a freelancer, and then how your business has evolved over time, and learnings that you've accumulated along the way. So with that being said, how did you get started? I know you were working full time as an engineer. What did that transition look like for you?
Yeah, so I can roll it back even further and sort of talk about my initial career as a mechanical engineer. Both of my degrees are in mechanical engineering. I went and worked for a company called Lockheed Martin for about 5.5 years in various research positions. I found that I was enjoying the software components of those more than the mechanical aspects. And so I slowly transitioned my responsibilities towards the software end of things. Eventually, I decided to make that a full-time switch. And I was here in San Francisco, where that means usually web development and web infrastructure. And so I ended up applying for a full-time role at a health tech startup. Was there for about 18 months, where I learned a ton about sort of how to take the coding skills that I had and turn them into more software engineering skills, and how to work within a large team, how to work within a large code base. But in addition to learning a ton, I also got a bit burnt out. And so after those 18 months of time, I essentially decided I needed to take a step back for a little while. I let the company know that. We came up with a plan to transition all my responsibilities. And during that period between when I left that role and when I was planning to apply to additional roles, I essentially started a YouTube channel, started a blog, just as a means for me to continue to learn and build and teach on these topics that I was very excited about. That led me to a few different things. One, I wrote an article that did pretty well on a news aggregation site, Hacker News. That led to some inbound interest in what I was doing and the skill set that I had. And that actually led to my first client that was through an article I'd written. We started discussing about what they were working on, where it intersected with my skills, and how I might be able to help them out. And so I kind of stumbled into this freelance thing. I didn't have a grand master plan of, okay, I'm going to leave this role and then go all in on freelance consulting. I sort of stumbled into that first contract, and then really enjoyed the flexibility that it brought, and continued. And I've been doing that for the last 1.5 years now.
Awesome. And I do want to circle back to, at Lockheed, you said you developed some coding skills there and then use those to apply for a job. How did you just develop some coding skills at Lockheed?
Sure. So I think most engineering curriculums will have a coding component. You're going to be writing some software to, in this case, probably for mechanical engineering, maybe analyze the stresses in a particular design that you're creating. Or in my case, I was working on control systems, and so that's sort of the intersection between mechanical and software systems, where we were writing algorithms to steer mirrors and deform mirrors that were pointing lasers. And so there was a lot of software involved in these projects, and there would usually be mechanical engineers on the team, software engineers on the team. And so there was plenty of work to go around in both of those domains. And so whenever there was an opportunity, I would volunteer for that type of work. So if we were building out the model, I would say, oh, well, let me help with this piece of the software. And then I would work with a software engineer who was already on the team and take on some of that responsibility. And then slowly I was able to grow that until it was taking up more and more percentage of my role.
It's pretty incredible to just kind of build that skill almost organically within that company. The next thing I want to hit on is you started this YouTube channel, you started this blog, and you talked about to learn and maybe help some other folks. Walk us through a little bit about what that looked like. A lot of people are interested in kind of getting their content out there, but they don't know how to get started. How did you get started with that? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, so I really enjoy teaching. Even in when I was in that full-time role, I kind of started a lunch and learn to teach people how to use SQL. So if there were people at our company who weren't necessarily technical, but they needed to answer business questions using the data in our SQL database, I helped them sort of learn the basics of SQL to at least be able to get started. And then they would come and potentially need help advancing those queries or validating those queries. But I really enjoyed the teaching aspect that provided. And so I thought that a content, either in written form or in video form, would be a good mechanism to continue to sort of scratch that itch personally. And so I knew I wanted to do it. I knew I wanted to focus on this DevOps space. There's a ton of software engineering YouTubers focused on front-end web development and JavaScript and Python, but there weren't at the time very many people on sort of the back-end and DevOps and infrastructure side of things. And so I saw an opportunity there and really just started doing it. I had a $50 webcam. I think I bought a $30 microphone, and then I had my laptop already. And that was about all I really needed to get started. If you go back to my channel, and we can share a link to it or put it in the description, it's called DevOpsDirective. And you look at the most early videos on that channel, they're so ugly. It's grainy video footage. I don't know how to talk on camera. And it just took many repetitions. I think I'm up to, 50 or 60 videos by now over the course of the last year. And each one trying to build on the previous one of, okay, where did I stumble in that last one? How can I make the edit tighter so it's easier to follow? Where can I explain things a little more clearly so that the audience won't get lost along the way? And so slowly over the course of the last year, I've leveled up both my skill set of being on camera and being able to talk and explain things clearly, but also slowly leveled up the equipment. So now I'm on a $500 camera with a $400 lens, and I'm looking a lot better than I used to. But the real key is lighting and sound, I think, are things that you want to level up early on, and you can get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of upgrading equipment in those domains. But yeah, it's just been a slow build, both in terms of the quality of the content as well as the audience. I hit 10,000 subscribers a couple of months ago, and so it continues to build from there.
Wow, that's great. And I want to hit on that first point that you mentioned where you didn't really have much to start out with. And that's okay, right? You got to get started. I think everybody wants things, whether it's a website or a YouTube channel, to be perfect when you put it out there, because it's kind of scary. You're putting yourself out there online. And when you first start, it's okay that it's not perfect. In fact, no one expects it to be. Just get started, right? And is that kind of the advice that you would give?
That's definitely the advice I would give. There's also an added benefit that unless you're doing something live, you could literally record it and never post it. So there's no harm or no risk even of recording it, because then you can edit it and decide, oh, that's not good enough. I would encourage you to just post it anyways, even if you think it's not quite good enough. But yeah, there's literally no risk to just getting started. So do it, make it the best you can, and know that eventually it's going to improve over time the more reps you put in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing is you talk about now about 10,000 subscribers, which is incredible. I know it was a long road to get there. If I make 3 or 4 YouTube videos and I end up with 7 subscribers, right? Can you tell us how you built that up and what advice would you give for someone just starting out?
Yeah, early on, you're not going to get many views, you're not going to have many subscribers, and you just have to be okay with that. It's definitely a long play to do a content creation strategy. I wasn't initially thinking of it as an inbound marketing for my consulting. Now it actually does generate a fair amount of inbound on that front. So I think you need to be intrinsically motivated about, or think very carefully about what is motivating you to do this. Because early on, you're exactly right. You're not going to get the views. You're not going to get the subscribers. There are anomalies who are just exceptional and create wildly entertaining content that go viral immediately. But it's much more likely that initial 6 months to a year, it's going to be a slow grind. For me, on my early videos, I would try to find targeted communities in which I could share the content. So there were some subreddits focused around specific technologies that I was using. Twitter using specific hashtags around a particular technology. There were some Facebook groups, but those tend to be pretty spammy. But early on, posting in those communities, getting a little bit of traction where I would see, I don't know, a few hundred views from making the front page of some tiny little subreddit, was very satisfying and sort of helped to show that there was potential there.
I mean, 6 months to a year, kind of that slog, right? I mean, that's really what people need to expect going into creating content to eventually get some real traction. And as you said, you have to know your why, because otherwise you get incredibly discouraged quickly and you're probably not going to continue. So
for sure. Yeah, there are, I think as you figure out how to do it being create content that your audience is excited about, you will start to see progress and figure out what works. I had some early success with written content on my blog at DevOpsDirective.com, where I was talking about the first article that did really well was I analyzed the pricing of a particular technology across the different cloud providers. So there's this technology called Kubernetes. I looked at the different managed offerings and did an analysis of how did Microsoft compare with Google, compare with AWS, and made a little tool to assess your own costs for various architectures. That article, I think, is maybe the second article or third article on my website, did get to the front page of Hacker News, and that brings tens of thousands of eyeballs to that. And so if you can strike the right topic and style and content quality, then you can have quick success. But it's very hard to sort of get all those things to line up. And so the way that I've found is best is to take a lot of swings, and make each one as good as you can. But you never know which of the swings is going to be the home run.
That's what's crazy, right? You can align all of those things that you think is the right combination of audience, content, how you portray it, messaging, and you could do that 20 times, and 2 of them, or maybe only 1, is the one that really takes off, and you don't, as you said, you don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at my channel, the video with the most views by far is a video that I made in less than a day. It's me talking about when Apple released their new Apple M1 silicon chip. I did I think it's maybe a 6-minute video describing 4 issues that I saw from a software compatibility perspective that I was not going to buy it yet. And so I had a feeling that one would do really well. It was kind of the one contrarian viewpoint at the time, where most of the reviews on YouTube were just touting how insane the benchmarks for this particular new product were. And so I brought up some real points that resonated with people, and immediately just saw a huge search traffic from that particular video. And so, yeah, that one was just sort of the right combination of things. It's interesting because it's a little bit outside of my niche where most of my other content is, but it ended up working.
I think to that point, it's not being afraid to oppose. In fact, maybe being encouraged to oppose a common viewpoint, because, yeah, people do want to see something that's different, and that could be what drove traffic there.
For sure. Yeah.
So you launched this YouTube channel, and you do get an article to the top of Hacker News, which is great. And that ends up, as you said, you kind of fell into consulting. That generated some lead gen. What did that look like? You get a few people reaching out saying, hey, I'd love to chat with you. What happens then? Yeah.
So some email-based communication. So just saying, hey, I saw your article, loved it. And that starts a conversation. Some people, it wasn't an explicit like, hey, can we hire you? Some people just wanted to reach out and ask what I was doing or see what was going on. The first contract actually was through a friend who texted me and I saw this article. Do you have any experience with Kubeflow, which is a machine learning platform on top of Kubernetes? So we're like 7 layers of abstraction away from the actual compute that is happening. But anyways, I did not have experience with that particular platform, but I had a lot of experience with the layer that it's built on top of. And so we just got to chatting, and it sounded like they were considering using it. I spent a little bit of time researching it on my own. And then we scoped out a contract. Initially, it was like a month and a half to deploy the system and migrate some of their workloads onto it. And that went really well. And so I've actually been working with that client on an ongoing basis for over a year now. So,
wow, that's great. So how did it go? Give us a little more detail. So it ended up being a month and a half. How did you come to that 6-week agreement? What did the rate discussion or negotiation look like, if there was any?
sure. It was pretty simple. We basically scoped out. I said I think it'll take about this long to get this system in place with the tooling around it that will allow you all to run with it. That was probably about a month of work, and then a couple of weeks to migrate a couple of these workloads onto it. Scope wise, yeah, we thought it would be about a month and a half. We didn't lock it to that. We decided to go with an hourly rate just to minimize the friction up front. I know at Mylance you talk about a few different pricing models. You can go hourly rate. The pros of that, from my perspective, there's a few. One, you have to do very much less scoping up front, because as long as the client understands the potential extension, you don't have to necessarily agree as strictly on the specific deliverables, as long as both you and the client are willing to extend or shorten, depending on how things go. If you want to do a fixed price contract for a scope of work, then it has to be super tight in the contract. What are the deliverables and what are the acceptance conditions? And so in this case, I was still decompressing from that period of burnout. I knew that I wanted to have very clean separation of work and life. And so doing an hourly based project helped me psychologically to manage that. And so that was a big part of why I really like consulting, is it helped keep things super clean mentally for me. Of if I'm not charging someone, if I'm not working for them, I'm not charging them for it, and I don't feel bad about not working, right? And so that helped me a ton. Whereas previously in full-time roles, there's always more that can be done. And I had a very hard time of turning off in terms of knowing that it was okay to take that rest period for my own mental health. And so freelancing has brought a lot of clarity around that for me. But back to the original question of this contract and scoping it. So yeah, we decided it would take about a month and a half to do what we wanted to do. In terms of rate, because I wasn't even considering freelance as like a full-time thing, I think I lowballed at like something quite similar to my W-2 rate, which is not comparable, as you know, because of benefits, et cetera, additional taxes. My friend was very kind and sort of countered with a more reasonable rate that was actually higher than I had offered. Yeah, I was just thinking of this as another thing that would be a month and a half, and then I would go off and apply to full-time jobs. So I wasn't actually even thinking of it as like a core piece of my income for the future. So that's just sort of where my mindset was at for this project. So that was a very easy negotiation, given that he countered up and I said, sure. And so we locked in that contract and worked for a little while. The delivery of the project went well. We extended. Eventually, I did negotiate that rate upwards. And so, yeah, we're continuing to work with that client still.
That's awesome. And so sounds like a good friend there to say, hey, look, Sid, you're not valuing yourself enough here, right? Let's get you some more money.
Yeah, exactly. And my thinking with that initial lowball offer was, I just want to make this sounds like a really interesting project. I want to make the upfront friction as low as possible, because I'm going to go do this for a month and then go off and apply to new jobs.
Right.
So yeah, it's a different mindset, I think, when you're approaching consulting as your core form of income versus something different than that, which is how I was approaching it.
Yeah. And so now that consulting is the majority of your core income, how does it compare both in absolute numbers and hours to when you were working full time for some really impressive companies?
Yeah, so I explicitly keep about half of my time open for the content creation stuff. So I work on average, in terms of my actual consulting gigs, 20 hours a week, plus or minus, depending on the demands, the milestones for delivery for the particular clients that I'm working with at that time. That gives me the mental space to take a Wednesday and write a script, or take a Friday and film and edit. And having that flexibility is really key for me. In terms of rate, I think hourly I'm charging about double what the W-2 rate would be if you divided it out on an hourly basis. And that most of the time hasn't gotten too much pushback from clients. I think as long as you can differentiate yourself in terms of why they would want to hire a consultant rather than a full-time person. And for me, oftentimes my clients are startups who have a core engineering team, but none of them are experts in cloud infrastructure and DevOps. They've usually put something in place to get started, and that's great. But they've reached the point where there's a lot of toil of like repeated stuff that just sort of happens that you can automate away or design slightly better. But there's not enough tasks there to warrant hiring a full-time employee to take them on. There's maybe 25, a quarter person, maybe a half person worth of work. And so that's sort of the why you want to hire a contractor versus a full-time. You can bring someone in, they can help automate a lot of this stuff, make some changes, help reduce the toil within the current engineering team and make them more efficient. But eventually you're going to reach the point where it's a full-time job. And so that's where you probably want to let me go and you want to hire a full-time person to do this. And so really being able to articulate that period of time and finding the companies where that is true helps really bring the value proposition for the type of work that I do. And then differentiating myself, it's really being able to point to a lot of the work that I've done in public with these articles and open source code and videos can help to validate me as an expert, even if I'm coming in not through my network. So if I'm coming in through my network, I'm usually validated by the person who's referring me. But if I'm coming to an organization that is not a part of my network or more than one hop away, then being able to point to a lot of this public sort of evidence is a huge win to start that conversation on the right foot.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on so many good points there that we talk about a lot in Mylance about differentiating yourself, putting yourself out there. And then the key one that you started with, and it's second nature to you now, but your target client, right? You just rattled off exactly who that company is, where they have this engineering team, but not this specific expertise. And you come in at that point, right? Mm-hmm. And so everyone else listening to this, obviously their answer is different, but knowing and thinking through what that is, and then iterating as you learn with different clients is so key to then continuing to find the right match where people aren't even pushing back against your rates because it's just the right fit. And that's kind of, then it's relatively easy to get that next client because you know where you fit in, you know what success looks like.
Yeah, for sure. I think my niche is still even a bit too broad as described, and am debating whether to hone it even further to really target Kubernetes as a platform and helping startups who are at that same stage that I described, but have probably built on a platform as a service offering like Heroku or Google's App Engine, and maybe are deciding that they're at the edge of what they want to do on that platform and want to migrate to something like Kubernetes. I think there are a number of companies out there, and I need to do a little bit more work to validate that hypothesis. But I think that there could be a really targeted niche there to come in and help a company. And I've actually seen some companies that target this niche as well. Help a company migrate their application onto this Kubernetes-based approach, and then teach their team how to use that new system, and then continue and move on. And that would sort of be a cleaner, almost a productized consulting offering that I haven't done, but I've thought about exploring.
Yeah, sounds really interesting. And what if I've learned anything from freelancing is that the more niche you get and then find the right match with the company, that's where your rate can really get up there, right? Because they absolutely need it. You're absolutely the right person for it. And it's just done, right? You can kind of almost ask for whatever you want because you're such the right person for that opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing I want to hit on just real quick is you talked about double what your rate was as a W-2. You're working about 20 hours a week, give or take. Does that mean you're making basically your old salary in 20 hours or not quite?
Not quite, given the additional taxes and paying for my own insurance and that sort of thing, but close enough that it is comfortable to live on and enables these other things that I would like to do in terms of the YouTube channel.
I mean, that's incredible, right? Even if you're 80% of your previous salary in 20 hours a week across different clients and enables you essentially 3 full days a week to work on anything you want or take a day off or travel or anything. I mean, that's really the beauty of freelancing, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think I always had a hard time taking a step back for a vacation, etc. And so it has been a much healthier relationship with my work now that I am sort of more in control of it.
Yeah, it's incredible. Any learnings specifically around consulting, finding clients, optimizing scopes of projects, maintaining that balance that you want to share with our listeners as you've gone on your journey?
I think the key thing, and this is not unique to freelance consulting at all, is to just always over deliver on everything. I was just looking back through an email chain from the very first project that I had, and this is actually before I started with that client that I described earlier. I can go through this story if we want in a bit, but was just looking back through that email chain and sort of I'd written a script to automate something for them, and then I had gone off on a trip around the world, so I was kind of unavailable. And so I emailed, I don't know, 3 weeks into this trip, just saying, hey, I noticed that the website that they were using the output of this script for was live. Hope things went well. How did things go? And just the response was that everything had went smoothly, like the script worked great, etc. But I was just thinking back to how every time you over deliver, you open up an opportunity for that person to become a champion moving forward and sort of refer you to someone in their network, bring you back in for additional work. If they move on to a new company, then you have a foot in the door there. Just sort of always building out that network. And the best way to do that is to just deliver value to the clients that you're working with.
Yeah, I love it. And so many of the successful consultants, they build their business on word of mouth. It's referral based. It's the best way to do it. As you said, it validates you immediately. You don't need to even point to anything else. So yeah, if you over deliver, under promise, over deliver, what we always say, you're just setting yourself up for success with more than just that client, right? It has kind of ongoing consequences in a great way for your business.
Yeah, for sure. And I think most people are going to get started with word of mouth. Eventually that Rolodex may or may not exhaust itself. And so the fact that you can then expand that beyond the people that you know immediately and build up that reputation as the person to go to for your particular niche is sort of what allows that to continue once you have exhausted your closest network.
And I always thought about it as if I get 2 introductions from every person in my network that I'm working with, then I have an exponential growth in leads, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's how I always thought about it. Do great work, ask for introductions. And it got to a point where I was talking to someone and I don't even know how I got introed to them at that point, right? It was so far down the line, which is the great thing, right? It was just continuing to build out my network, and there were really as many clients as I want. And I'm sure that's really the same case for you at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll give a shout out. There's a couple people I see in the comments that I recognized, Francesco and Ali. Bradley and I are just talking about freelance and my experience working as a freelance consultant.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, guys. As we wrap up, any lasting comments, recommendations for the audience? Our audience is looking to freelance, looking to grow, professionalize their freelance business. Any comments or thoughts for them?
Yeah, I think experimenting with it while you still have a full-time role, as long as your employment contract allows for that. Some employment contracts wouldn't, but figuring out whether that's possible, and if so, picking up a very small scope of work on the side can help you evaluate whether this is something that you would like to do or something that maybe is not the best fit. So I think exploring it, giving it a shot, and doing it in the way I just described helps to de-risk it a bit, because you haven't abandoned the comfort of your full-time role, but I think could be a good way to dip your toes in the water.
Awesome. And where can our audience find you?
Yeah, so on YouTube, if you just search DevOps Directive, you'll find my channel. I focus on DevOps and cloud infrastructure content, a mixture of short form tutorials, long form interviews, live coding, etc. So check that out. And then also DevOpsDirective.com.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
All right. You too.